Hey, welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name's Elliott and you're watching Rickety Ski Reviews. Today, we're talking about the most forgotten, underappreciated ski technology out there, and that is the Leki ski pole trigger system. Now, full disclosure, I was given from a family member my first pair of mittens, the Leki Explorers, and then I reached out to Leki, and Leki provided the WCR mitten and the Patrol 3D ski glove, as well as the Helicon Lite adjustable backcountry poles and the Spitfire 3D poles. Now, some of this was bought by my family member. I think they won it in like a raffle or something and just gave it to me. And the rest was provided by Leki, but I'm not paid by Leki. I have no affiliation with Leki. They provided the product and I'm giving my honest opinion. I will look and see if I can find some affiliate codes down below. That's how you can support these kind of independent ski review. But other than that, I have no money being paid by Leki or any other ski brand for that matter, and I'm gonna give my 100% honest opinion. So first, let's just talk about the trigger system. That's kind of what makes Leki distinct. I'll talk about like my first impressions on that. We'll talk about the good, the bad, and my overall opinion on these poles and this trigger system. And then I'll kind of just give you my opinion on each individual product if you find that interesting. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Now, my first impression, I have never owned a Leki pole. I've never owned a Leki mitten other than the one that was gifted to me. Gotta say, I was pretty skeptical at first. There are so many gimmicks out there between BOA, between double BOA, between the shred shocks. It's really easy to be skeptical of a lot of ski technology because a lot of times you're like, what problem is this fixing? And to be fair, ski poles with straps, it's not a broken technology. It works fine. But I will say, despite my skepticism, my first impression with this was so positive. I feel like this is actually the opposite, where this is the least appreciated ski technology that a lot of people would really enjoy. For some people, I could see not liking it. There are people who are very particular. They don't even like putting their straps on. But I gotta say, for me personally, I was blown away and really, really pleasantly surprised by this system. As always, there's a couple drawbacks, we'll get into that, but my first impression with this was really positive, and the thing I really like about it is because you essentially have these little loops, if you look really closely, inside of the mitten that these triggers connect with, and then if you want to release it, you press down on this button, slide it right out. The thing that I really like about that is without having the straps there, you don't have to grip your poles so hard. I get really tensed up when I ski, and my favorite thing about this is you can just kind of have an open hand and your pole stays right there. I think for a lot of people, this would help them relax their upper body. For me, I found that at first it felt a little gimmicky and I was pretty unsure of it, but now that I've been using it for the last couple of months, I don't want to go back. I love using this trigger system. Just in that little thing of having my upper body more relaxed, having an open hand is so nice and it's so hard to go back from. This reminds me a lot of road biking with clipless pedals. Once you've experienced something this well integrated, it's hard to go back. But like any product, this product has good things about it. It has drawbacks, so let's jump into those. But overall, I will say, my experience was really positive, and this is about 95% positive with a couple of drawbacks. Now, like I mentioned in my first impression, I really like how you can just have this clipped in, and rather than like having to hard grip, and then sometimes that tension kind of, for me, spreads to my shoulders, and I get really locked up like this when I'm skiing. It's nice to just like drive your downhill shoulder while you're skiing, and just have an open palm, and not worried about the pole having to be exactly where it needs to be and gripping it. You can have an open palm, especially when you pole plant and this is your inside ski. You can kind of just let this drag and it allows you to get a low angle without having a tense upper body. I really, really love the dynamic of this. The other perk I found, for me specifically, I've noticed when I'm watching myself on camera, all of my GoPro footage, you can see how long I'm taking to put the straps on my poles before, oh, do I have my right hand in the right loop, yada, yada, yada. It doesn't seem like much, but once you start noticing it on camera, I waste a ton of time trying to figure out which hand is in the right loop. What's nice about these is you can clip either pole into either mitten and it doesn't matter. And there's no like spinning around, making sure it's right. You just clip it in and go. So, you know, it's not much time. It's maybe saving you 30 seconds at the top of the hill, but certainly a nice feature. The other thing that I found really nice, especially as someone who works with a camera while I'm skiing, or if you ski in a warmer climate, and you notice that a lot with doing the camera, right? You have to take my mitten off to press the little button. What's nice about this is I can take my mitten out, take both my mittens off, put them like this, leave them on the poles, and then put them in between my legs on the chair so that they just kind of sit there. Or if I'm working with camera equipment and I'm trying to get the POV of the skis, I can just put the gloves in the poles and then squat down. I will just say, dealing with kids, getting things out of my pocket, being in a warm climate where I want to check my phone when I'm on the chairlift, it's nice to just leave my mittens on the poles and keep going. I don't know if some people may not like that, they may not trust it, but for me, I did find over time it was a nice luxury to have. I'm talking a lot about the trigger system specifically because that's kind of what sets these apart. The other nice thing is that if you buy the poles and you don't have the trigger system, they do come with these straps so you can adjust whatever glove or mitten you have to make that work. Oh yeah, I like the way that it promotes good fluid motion. I talked about that a little bit, but I've tested some of those touring poles where you kind of grab them from the bottom, and they work great, and I think probably for touring or somebody who does more backcountry, they make more sense. But what ends up happening is because you're grabbing the pole by the middle, you have this top end here, and there's nowhere for it to kind of go. So you end up having to kind of twist the pole when it's in your inside pole to drive it forward. What's nice about this is, because it's kind of on this hinge, you can drive your shoulder forward and this just kind of pivots out of your way without having to adjust your wrist and make for upper body awkward movements. This piece kind of pivots on its own, and I find that to be really nice. As far as other pluses go with Leki in general, I like that these are metal poles because what's nice is you could take the grip off of the top and then you could cut it down if you need to. I have carbon poles, and while I like that those are lightweight, I cannot easily cut those and adjust the height. These are very solid, well-built metal poles, and I do like that. Normally I don't like metal poles, but they've been able to make these so light that I found these were actually a little bit nicer than my Vocal Fantastics. I also found with the mittens specifically, these were extremely warm. These are the warmest race mitten I've ever owned. I was a little nervous at first because you see how, if you look really closely, there's a different material just below the leather. And whenever you get that, where you get two different textures touching each other, you have the opportunity for the seams to split and for the product to fall apart, specifically mittens. What's nice about this is that the seams are so well knit that I didn't get any separating, and that little bit of extra room creates loft and makes these the warmest race mittens I've ever owned. I've owned a lot of race mittens over the years, Roosh, Eau Claire, Hestra, you name it, I've probably owned it. These were the warmest ones by far. They gave me a tight, firm grip while still keeping my hands very warm. The same is true for these backcountry mittens. These were the warmest mittens I've ever owned, and on really cold, stormy days, this was kind of my go-to powder day mitten, and I absolutely love them. They also had a pocket here for hand warmers, so you can have your hand warmers not getting in your way and still keeping you warm. I don't tend to struggle with hand warmth a lot, but when it's really cold, I do really like going out and skiing in big storms, and I found that this was the warmest mitten I've ever owned. It's a nice blend. I used to have some of those Burton mittens that would come down back when I snowboarded, and this is a nice blend of Leki comfort and warmth with that kind of snow skirt style, and this is far and away the warmest mitten I've ever owned. This is such a nice product. It's got the leather where you need it. It's also got the loft and warmth you want. I liked my old Burton mittens, but they were kind of thin material. They weren't very rugged, and they didn't have as much loft as I would have liked. They just kind of kept that room empty for hand warmers. This is kind of insulated loft that keeps your fingers warm towards the tips, and then less insulation here where you need kind of rotation around your wrist. They also sent these gloves here, Patrol 3Ds. I was a little skeptical at first because these look like every other kind of cheap coach's gloves. I used to have a pair of Rosignol's like this, where they're nice because, you know, you're just kind of working on bindings and throwing salt, so they don't need to be too nice. So I was like, okay, you know, these are gonna be kind of much wimpier, not as well made as the mittens. Not at all, actually. These fingers are so well insulated without being bulky or in the way. This is the first time pair of gloves I've liked in the last like decade. I normally hate gloves. I hate the way they articulate, but these manage to be warm while also, again, like they're insulated, but they have really nice, high quality leather on the outsides, so they remain durable. I think the pictures online don't do them justice. This is not as warm as the mittens for sure, just with your fingers being separated, but for spring skiing, this has kind of become my new go-to because, again, it's got that built-in trigger system, plenty of wrist angulation, and a nice blend of like insulation with mobility of the fingers, so you can kind of work on your bindings or grab stuff out as much as you might need to. These are much nicer than you might think. These kind of look like, you know, your baseline Kinko coach's glove. Not at all. This is like a high-end premium glove that's well insulated, hive movement. Definitely not as warm as the Mittens, like I said, but probably my go-to for spring skiing now. Like I said though, I'm not paid by Leki, and I was super skeptical about all of this stuff. I've never gone out and bought the trigger system myself, but I was so pleasantly surprised, and now every other product that I've had has pretty much been collecting dust. I am testing out some other race mittens, and I like my ruches for different kind of conditions compared to these, which are warm. But I'd say 9 out of 10 days I'm reaching for these because I love that trigger system so much. The other pulls I reviewed were these Leki Helicon Lites. These are adjustable backcountry pulls. I've been using these for all of my powder days and I absolutely love them. They have kind of this optional center area that you can grab if you need to when you're touring, but they don't force you to do that. They still have a nice hand grip. This is actually one of my favorite grips because it has a little piece here on the lower part. It just feels so good. And what I found is, I think a lot of people would enjoy adjustable pulls because what I've found is I can play with length, and I like shorter pulls, especially when I'm in the powder, especially when I'm in the bumps. I'm normally a 120 centimeter length, and I've been able to do a 117 centimeter length. These do have the straps, which is fine, but it'd be nice if I had the option for the trigger. I guess I don't know if I'd really use it. I do kind of like in the backcountry this big open thing, and I typically use these with the big powder mitt, and I found that it works fine. But I love these pulls. What's kind of cool with the baskets is you have your traditional like big powder basket for being able to get momentum, but they have these kind of harder plastic edges. What's nice is when you're carving, if you drag it along, this basket doesn't get caught up because it's kind of got this flat, smooth surface you can kind of run it along. You can also interconnect these pulls so that they're easier to carry when you're hiking, or if you need to like just kind of pack them away. Adjustable pulls are nice. The one downside with these is that because this pull area is adjustable, I find that the product is more lightweight rather than tough. When I'm banging on my boots with my other Leki pulls, it's not a problem, but I find myself just being a little bit more ginger with these because there's more points of articulation. It doesn't feel like something I could just bang on my boots all season long without breaking. So take that for what it's worth, but I think for a lot of people who are hiking or doing backcountry skiing, they care more about the lightweight feature of the pull rather than the sturdiness. But you know, for the powder days, I'm not being really hard on these anyway. But now that we've gotten all chummy, let's talk about the downsides, because like any product, these products have downsides and I want to be 100% honest about them. So the first one is, for these race mittens, this is gonna sound silly. It has kind of this hard diamond texture if you look really close, which I do like because it's very tough without having to be really big and bulky. The only downside is that if you ever wipe your nose with it, it is like sandpaper on your skin. What's nice is this tip part has a nice smooth texture, but God forbid you use the lower part where it's sandpaper. I think they kind of thought about that, but if you ever use the top of it, just know that your face will be shredded. It's not a big deal, and I do like the ruggedness of it, but just something to point out. The other upside that I forgot to mention, these little loops on race mittens, can we put this on every mitten? I didn't have it on my other two mittens, and oh my God, do I love it. Because what it allows you to do is when you're skiing, you just grab this little loop, put your mitten in, and go. Every mitten should have that. And that's something I like about these. The other downside I would say is probably what makes it so you don't see a lot of these systems out there, is that you have to buy a mitten and a pull at the same time. And I think a lot of people don't need to buy those things simultaneously, so you don't want to spend all of that money all at once. So you end up with the pull, but not with the mittens, or you end up with the mittens, but you're not using the trigger system. I think in order to get the full benefit of this system, you have to buy both, and that is probably why you don't see as many people talking about it. They do provide these adapters that you can put over your mittens, gloves, or whatever, and then you can use any mitten with their trigger system. The problem is that these are not as well integrated. They go over your mitten, and then there is a little bit more slack, a little bit more wiggle room. If you want the full trigger system, you have to kind of buy into the mittens and the pulls, because this doesn't move at all on you, and then you get that fully articulating trigger system. This is kind of a watered down version of that, and the experience isn't as great. I don't know how you fix that, and I'm sure if Leki could figure that out, they would. Honestly, when I was testing these with my Roosh mittens, I just put them on and left them on for a few days so I could fully test them. But I do think that this is just an inferior experience. The trigger system, when it's fully integrated, is so good that I could see people testing it with these and being like, I don't need the trigger system, I don't really like it. And I think that's where a lot of the kind of negative outlook on these pulls comes from. And honestly, that was my first impression. I had friends that didn't have the fully integrated mittens. They had this, and I tried it and was like, that doesn't look that great. When you get it fully integrated, that's when you really experience it, and it is fantastic. It's so slept on. It's like booster straps. It's like, oh, here, everyone talk about all these other products. Oh, you need carve, you need yada, 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 whatever. This is a product that I actually think makes a big difference, and I love using it, and I'm never going back, baby. I'll use these until they blow up. I love using the trigger system, and I'm not going back. But we're talking negatives. Let's keep going. I think, oh yeah, it takes some getting used to. These are really easy to clip in, right? You just push it into the ground, push it down, and it locks in. And what can happen is, if you've ever had road bike clipless pedals, these are very similar to that in that it can be a little bit awkward to take off. You press down on the button and release it, but what happens is, if you're only using one hand, you press down and then you kind of have to like, do this awkward motion, and you don't know how to get off. So if you've ever been on a clipless road bike and you come to your first stop sign and you're like, oh God, you're trying to get your foot off and then you fall over, it can feel awkward. These kind of feel like that to a much smaller degree, but I found that after using them for the last couple of months, you figure out ways of doing it. So the way that I do it is it clips in and then you just use your second hand. You hold this here, clip it down, put it away. It takes like half a second once you get used to it, but I could see somebody testing their friends and being like, oh, I don't like that feeling, it feels awkward to release. It's not, it's really easy, but it takes some getting used to. The other downside, I found that if you are somebody who buckles your boots every time, you have to kind of remember not to have your pulls on. If you have straps, you can kind of let them dangle and then you close your boots. You can do it, but if you are kind of fiddling with your buckles, this pull can get in your way. But I don't know. I found that you just do your order of operations different. You get used to it. It's just a minor change, and the overall performance gain is awesome. I love it. So what do I give these for a score? Well, these pulls retail on Evo for $140, although you can find them on sale for less sometimes. I used to spend like $150 to $200 on my carbon pulls. I know pulls have gotten cheaper. I think I spent like $80 to $90 on my Vocal Fantastics, but for $140, I think these are awesome. The Leki World Cup mitts I have are $200 full price, although that's pretty standard fare for race mittens. And obviously the time of year you buy them will change. But honestly, I mean, those are kind of standard prices for a premium mitten and a little bit below what I see the Roosh mittens for. I think the value is absolutely there. This is a high quality product for a fair price. Yes, it's a little bit pricier, but when you buy nice stuff, it lasts longer and it keeps your hands warmer. And I would 100% recommend these. My dad actually was recently asking about a warm mitten because as his circulation is getting worse, he's wanting warmer and warmer mittens. I 100% recommended these to him, and Leki didn't send me these. These were gifted to me by someone else, so anyway, I can't recommend this stuff enough. What would I give it for a score? There's a couple little downsides, and I could see somebody being really particular and not liking it, so if you can go and test it out, I think that helps. But I was really skeptical of it myself before testing it and using it, and I do think if you're only kind of half doing it, then it becomes less valuable. I know Leki is working with Hestra to make some mittens that integrate with the system. Here's my thing, I think if you just buy into the whole system, it's 100% worth it. If you're only going halfway, I don't know if it's the best option out there. Though I will say with the Backcountry pulls, I can recommend those hands down. What would I give the Leki trigger system and all the products on average that I reviewed? Well, I'm never going back. I love this system. It also seems like Leki is more focused on just making a good product rather than getting this in a lot of influencers' hands, because I don't see a lot of people talking about this, and I absolutely loved it. So for me, it's a 9.2 out of 10. I think that if you do half measures and you don't fully buy into it, you're gonna have an inferior experience, and it can feel awkward. The trigger system is not at its best, but if you go fully integrated and you really use these and you put a lot of miles, if you're somebody who's only skiing 5 to 10 days a year, probably overkill, right? Like, you know, you probably have other things you need to focus on. But if you're somebody who's skiing 30 to 50 days, I love this and I will never go back. I love, love, love the Leki trigger system. This is the best pull and mitten system. And the nice thing is that they didn't cheap out on the mittens and, oh, well, you have to get it because you have the pulls. Both the poles and the mittens and the gloves are really well made, and I have no hesitation recommending this. So anyway, if you like this kind of independent content, we will have affiliate links down below. If you're buying mittens anyway, please use those links, as those do support the channel without costing you anything extra. I also have memberships. You can like and subscribe. But as always, more than anything, just thanks for taking the time to watch my videos. It means a ton to me, and I always appreciate it. Big shout out to Leki. Thank you for sharing these with me. I would not have gone out and tested this without you guys, so I really, really appreciate it. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. See ya.